the sugar, Tangajele, Manzo, Tarbata Temchi Kimbiko, one Kiwachima, Hadami, go one Toyalea, and giving Yamlan Chewores. That in Yamlin Chevala, the Yamlin Chena, the Shingo Wores, Jesa, the Nishin and the Shin on it, Ma and the chick, Nimere, Yamlan Chewores, or the Shirwa. The names are Yamlin Jay, Rimba, the Canistre, Lambda, Dambo, and then the Kiawa Chima, the Kawan, the Pay, the Kivinium, the chickens, and Piki, Kawa, Tugins, and Piki, and the Sambachita. The Nekawa to be a dealer, and the Ranshin, Tamji, and the Dewatoba, the Dumi, the Chiba, the Deza, Raman Chibu, some town, she has some Tamji to some Dana, that they didn't get Chimore, said Dine, and Jamba, Yakas Jamba Comia, Dijela Ninjicom. Dene Ninjicomne, Dene, and Simja Tamji, Dunga, the Java, the Nichi, Sipic, Lassam Gom. Then the Lassam Gomne, Dijelia, and then Simja Tamji to the Sanjo Copan Topper Show, Simpiki, and Jancho Sim Gomia, the Rimbadi Tisha. There's a Rimbadi in that, then the Comia, and I did Tambo to this show Shabana Rimbadi, Lucinagat, so you say the Papi, Kazecom to the Nimeria to Scomcore, Saji. I'll show a deco Shirwada.
Good afternoon. So this morning we looked at that in order to achieve the desired results of good rebirth, as well as the long-term goals of liberation from samsara and enlightenment itself, it's imperative that virtue is accumulated. And what is meant by virtue? This needs to be known and understood, and then this knowledge needs to be put into practice. One's mind needs to be trained. And then what are those stages of training or the progressive levels of virtue to engage in? Well, there's first the foundational practices that were mentioned in the preceding verses of reflecting on the preciousness of this life and its impermanence and so forth. And then when one comes to generate the determination to accumulate virtue, then one goes into the next step of the meditation, which is to recognize that this is, I've come to see clearly my situation, but this situation that I find myself in, of having this precious opportunity that will almost end, and our next life could go in one of two directions, and so forth. This is a situation that all beings find themselves in. All beings are either in the upper or lower realms, and if they are suffering in the lower realms, there's very little they can do to free themselves. Or if they're in the higher realms, there's always the danger of falling to the lower realms. Here, in the second part of the meditation, we generate first love, which is the sincere wish, may all beings abide in happiness. And thereafter, we generate compassion. May all beings attain freedom from suffering completely. And thirdly, independence on the love and compassion one has generated. One generates the altruistic attitude whereby one takes individual responsibility for the welfare of others. And fourthly, in order to fulfill this welfare, this commitment one has made, one generates bodhicitta, the determination to become a Buddha for the sake of others. And in this meditation, I've just mentioned the steps very briefly, one alternates between placement and analytical meditation. So this in brief is the meditation, and one, as it says in the text, is encouraged to meditate on this daily. So I encourage you to engage in this meditation every day, and the duration will vary depending on how much free time individuals have, but to do so consistently every day is indispensable to bring about mental transformation.
Those community Karalamna, Dene, those in a community, Samlo Nalia, Chida, Simje, Deva de Dena, Sambigi, Samlo de Yor Wangan Zugula, Simja Dunga de Dana, Sambigi, Samlo de Yore, Ineda, Nuba Chamber with Chatugo Marva. Chisnadi, Simja de Dunga de Dana, Deva de Dena, Samlo Yobadi, those in the Yane, Yando Yane, Gomba, Nuba Church to Gorva. Tina Simjam Judunga, the Jana Simbe, somebody answer Yorite in air, and Nubaska Jungo Mara. Did that the combine and the Nuba Church to go. And Dina Jinta, Nuba Church today, and Simjan Pemba Jubin Sempation, La Pendo Jetuna, Sambe, some Yorite in a Nubaska or Marwa. Did the dinner Zata combine, Nation to my said the chicken Simbe, some combine and Nuba Church. The ends are the Sanjoko about Topper shows and be some of the Yority, and then to Nubachim and Nubachertoella, Sanjoko Pontobi, Topper shows and be somebody Lucin, Gongo or Echetek, Gidi, Kazeo, Yasias come to win, I could some of the Nubacher to go. Nubacher, Kazir, Nubacher drove in there, Nazule Kawa Geshe, the Kawa said, Nazu some of the Disuri, some gentlemen, the Denas and be some of the Kaware, Tunganda Denas and be some of the Nijitian Kaware. Some Namda said and Gavare, Jajusim and Gavare, Tisongazuki, Yane, Yado Yane, and the Jevan Gawa Sabas or Sasana, Jik, Nije, Mangochuk, Jalasan, Mango Charu, Dinashin, Saraji, Gom, Ni, Gom, Sungum, then do in the combine, go Gawa Sabare, to Gawa the new church to war. Tisan Dineza and Tarbata, San Diego want to be a tiny rule, this one.
All these minds that one cultivates in the various stages of the meditation are minds that we have the seeds for. They're not unknown to us, they're not strangers to us. We have the wish for others to be happy, we have the wish for others to be freed of suffering and so forth. These we have. However, they are not ever present. They are not ever present, and they only arise sporadically, independent on particular causes. And moreover, not only do they arise sporadically, they do not abide for all that long. But whilst that is the case now, the mere fact that we do have these imprints means that they can be cultivated, they can be strengthened within us. And the process of doing so is exactly as been laid out. By the word for meditation, it's best understood through its synonyms of habituation or familiarization. As one becomes more habituated to a particular virtuous mind, that mind becomes ever more part of oneself. For example, if one meditates again and again on love, one becomes a more loving person. And someone that we recognize as is seen as being a very loving person, what it means is they are habituated to the consciousness of love, the mind of love, which means it easily arises within them and it remains present within them for a long period of time. So we have the ability to become habituated to love, to compassion, to the altruistic attitude and bodhicitta, as well as the foundational trainings of recognizing the impermanence of this life. To bring this about, though, requires repeated training over a sustained period. That is the method. So when the text says progressive levels of virtue, how to understand this word virtue or merit is that if minds are classified, they can be into those which are virtuous and those which are non-virtuous. By familiarizing ourselves with the virtuous minds, we accumulate them within us. They become ever stronger. Their capacity grows. So the accumulation of virtue refers to developing in strength virtuous minds, accumulating virtuous minds, such as love, compassion, understanding of impermanence, bodhicitta, and so forth. So this is how to understand the word virtue or merit. A meritorious mind, a virtuous mind, as we strengthen it, it becomes ever more powerful, and we accumulate this particular mind in this way, plus many companion minds. This is the accumulation of virtue.
Gomgoro, Sheba number Gomgoro, Lodigo Gomgoro, Comiadi. Jazanti, the Nuba de Kawa showers and Lodile Nuba, Nubetiki, Nube Cheshire Goro, Shebate, number Shebatilla. 제사다 아주 시주도 개와치마 가서 아주 넘버 쉐버도 두고 봐. 제사 넘버 쉐버도 다된 아주 개위 냠는지 장도시도 진 넘버 쉐버 코로는 나로 제텔에 개위 장도시도 봐서 시주도 개와디 캐줘야 요래서 디레다 넘버 쉐버도 줘도 다된 아주 넘버 쉐버디 개와디 장도시도 제사 코론 몰이야 개와디 레디고 봐. 제사 코론 줘도 는 개와디 용거래서 용다 되네.
So as mentioned in the fifth verse, when we die, our loved ones and our friends and our possessions will all be left behind. None can help us, none can accompany us. What does accompany us is our karmic imprints. And how do our karmic imprints accompany us? What is it that goes from life to life? This is our consciousness. So our continuum of consciousness goes from lifetime to lifetime, and the karmic imprints accompany that. So those karmic imprints will be virtuous and non-virtuous, classified into those two. As we habituate ourselves or meditate ever more on virtuous minds, we are placing ever stronger, more powerful, virtuous karmic imprints on our continuum. In other words, becoming more habituated to virtuous ways of thinking. And this is what, these imprints are what accompany us on our accompany our consciousness from rebirth to rebirth. And in this way, if we are strongly habituated to particular virtuous minds, so too will we be in our next life. Because this continuum of consciousness traveling from life to life.
안데네 자다는 심자 탐지기도 산요고방 토벌쇼 셈비게다 두신의 셈게네 나는 다디 셈게 데네 산요고방 토야래야 다 가르치고래 세도 셈게에 제라야 다 냠는 가르치고서도 나 파신주 냠는 냠로셔야다 냠로 셈게 냠로 냠는 제야다 파신주 냠는 제 진배 냠는 수련 냠는 수배인 전주인 냠는 삼대 냠는 셰럽지 냠는 세야디 디 냠는 제고고 산요고방 토발라 Jamdo ligre se jamdo nadine chasanji. 지난 셈게로 다 셈게네 다 셈게네 가셔오래 셈게 탐 산요고바 토벌 쇼슨 셈게 차로와 셈게 차네 디젤다 산요고바 토베도 내가 레고로와 다디도 군노데 셈게 토벌 쇼슨 베섬마도 요 말바다 다 셈게 차네 토비 칠도다 가는 냠는 제고를 토비하게 된다라 베네 총전에 직총데 토구 선배 베네 제머르신의 토구 선배네 디제고로와 디나신다 산요고바 토벌 쇼스 베 전주 셈게 바자 다 산지고바 토백이 된다 내가 가려고를 냠는 가르치고를 쓰는 하자 디가래야 아니 지금 먼저 냠로 고미하다 되네 진바도 수준수가 준주 삼대 셰르 냠는 지야 되게
Presented then the steps of the meditation up to the point where we generate bodhicitta. And bodhicitta is a consciousness, it's a determination to become a Buddha in order to guide beings to enlightenment. So this is how far we've got in the meditation. One has generated this determination, I will become a Buddha for the sake of others. So there, the meditation does not conclude there. It continues because the mere determination, as incredible as it is, to become a Buddha for the sake of others, on its own is insufficient to become a Buddha. There are various meditations still required. So those then will include refuge as well as the 6 perfections. Perfections of generosity, ethical restraint, patience, joyous perseverance, concentration, and wisdom. So these are the means by which the determination to become a Buddha for the sake of others is achieved. So therefore, the generation of bodhicitta is followed by the practices of a bodhisattva. And those are the 6 perfections. So we can understand it if, for example, the generation of bodhicitta, the determination to become a Buddha for the sake of others, is like if you've investigated a particular item and you decided now, I will buy it. So you've got to that point of deciding, I will buy it. That on its own doesn't mean you now have what you hope for. Just like the determination to become a Buddha for the sake of others, bodhicitta, that alone is insufficient. One is now not a Buddha. One needs to actually go out and buy this item or accumulate the causes so that one becomes a Buddha. So this then is the training of the 6 perfections as well as that of refuge.
삼로다 자주 셈 되네게 삼네 안 가르쳐 왔으네 안 잠돌 제일 배수 지고래 잠도 지고래 해서 접수 돌아 배세.
This brings us then to the 6th line. The 6th line in the 6th verse. Having contemplated that, go for refuge earnestly. Having contemplated that, so having generated bodhicitta, go for refuge earnestly.
다 접노시디 접수조의 유디가 rel합니다. 그래서 접수조의 유 될라 접수조하세데 점조하세데 접수조하데 다 접수조서 유디가 rel서네 권조 숨식으로 와다 당한 저희 낭배게 권조 숨센샤고 할때 권조 숨세데 사지 권조 취어 권조 기둥 권조 숨제 될라 접수조야 되지로 와다.
When one goes for refuge, so the word refuge is always used. Its synonyms perhaps are clearer. Go for protection. So where does one go for protection or go for refuge? Well, there are 3 objects to whom one goes to for refuge. And those 3 objects would be the Buddha jewel, the Dharma jewel, and the Sangha jewel.
지사다 상유권 조세에 안주 상유고바 토벌 쇼세비게 상기권 조세에 쓴디르와다 다 상기에서에 그러려네 균 탐제 방사와지 균군나 세바 균 차상 방균 차상 방사 균 균에매바 윤된 탐제 톱차와 시지 윤된 말려버 콘수 추바 안데 캠베 윤대나 안데네기 어찌균 방배 윤대 덴베게 다디 균 탐제세 시지 말려바 탐제 원순데 캠베게 다 가사데라 안데네기 데다 상계식으로 받아.
So look briefly at the 3 jewels. Then the Buddha jewel refers to a being which is a Buddha. What determines whether a being is a Buddha or not, whether they've attained enlightenment or not, is whether they've perfected their training. And perfected the training is indicated by all faults on the continuum being perfectly eradicated. So there's not a trace of fault left at all, as well as all good qualities having been perfectly developed to the fullest capacity. Such a being that has perfected all good qualities and perfectly removed or completely, so the word perfect or complete is the same word, completely abandoned all faults, completely developed all good qualities. Such a being is called a Buddha. And now the Buddha jewel to whom we turn for refuge is such a being. Dharma jewel, this refers to qualities of consciousness, true cessations and true paths.
데니기 최권조다 람된 냠는 제되겐 파베 가사 냠는 제되 파베 가사 되게라 내게 뉴권조식으로 하다.
And the 3rd jewel, that of the Sangha jewel, refers to those Arya beings who have generated the Dharma jewel within their continuum. They are and are still engaged on the paths of training. They are the Sangha jewel.
나 저게다 디캡유 숨디체 지나다 냥안줄에 캡수 줘야 돼 가르스네 캡수 줘 점도 제고를 해야 돼 냥안줄이 점도 제세대 가르쳐 버렸네 저게 다 데니게 산지 권조 최권조들라 안주 셈제 탐지 코르위 누가 타달래 껴봐 껴비 뉴바디 술로 요래더니 점력 권조 숨보들 요래스 제산 점력 권조 숨기 껴그래 셈베기 이시셔야 되다 점도래다 제산 데니게 캡유 숨디 뭐였음 제사다 셈제 탐주 코르위 누가로 껴비 뉴바디 술로 요래서네 디네 권조 숨보들 요래스 디네 권조 숨기 껴그래 셈베기 이시셔야 돼 대 이시 데니게 이시되다 capsu 점로 세고르다 돼
Those then are the three objects to whom one goes for refuge: the Buddha jewel, Dharma jewel, and Sangha jewel. And one does so with an understanding that through going to them for refuge, for protection, we will develop protection within ourselves. And this mind that is going for refuge, this mind is a mind of trust or conviction that the three jewels can lead to us attaining protection. This mind of trust or conviction is the mind of refuge.
다디 겹유체 겹수tro서 겹로스다 간주 겹로 냠네 겹로 곰 시도 데네게 삼로디다 두시는 곰디야 최고래 지사 겹유 숨도도 세 삼다니에 겹유세야데 산지 권조세 디네제 최권지디 기둥 거디네레 선배 삼로스다 디젤이야 다디 동아심자템주 동아탈레 겹베디 뉴바디 권조 숨딜레여 겹네 권조 숨 겹그레 삼베게 삼로다야디 간주기 겹로 냠네 제바하시고라 두시로 받아.
In the training to go for refuge, or training one's mind to go for refuge, this is done through first knowing what the three jewels are and how they have the ability to, how through relying on them, protection is attained. So one needs to understand the Dharma in this way, understanding what it is about the three jewels, how the three jewels, through relying on the three jewels, protection is attained. And then when this is understood and arisen in one's mind, one will naturally turn to them for protection, and that is the going for refuge.
나는 동아래 겹탕 가는 겹그레람나 겹다데 가는 겹그레선 나도 동아타데 겹그레 권조 겹그레 선비 이시 제바 잠기 안에 제마 나도 가야 제모가 제 권조기 방아도야 안 동아를 봐 제제야 안 타발이야 고야샤 끼샤 여러 배선에 되는지요 말해시래.
Hopefully it's clear from what has just been said, that going for refuge is a mind, it's a consciousness, not a recitation of a verse, which would this verse serves to give for that such a mind to arise. And a further point that's important to make is that when going for refuge, it's not that the three jewels out there protect oneself from suffering, that they have the power. Because this is what the words are, but the understanding needs to be clear. So the words are that they have the power and ability to protect oneself. So this isn't the actual meaning. This is how it is expressed, but it's not that the three jewels out there have the power to protect oneself, as in these three external beings who put a protection wheel around one. It's a little different to that.
산유 권조디기 나는술이야 탑람 뜬거래 나 동안에 세야지 탑람 다 탑람 가래 되지셔야지 아주 잠바 공부거래 이제 권을 자주제 직공거래 사도 콜위 동안 타르도가 삼바께거래 진짜 이제 공부가 자주 셈 공부래서 뒤서 탑람디 마 산유 권조 마 탑람 뜬거래 탑람 마 산유 권조기 마뜬 다 소소라랑기 탑론 뜬바나 신지 소소라랑기 다 곰자 그 대징어서 곰자에 냠는 지라 소소 쉬소 안디나시가서 냠는 지가 소소라랑게 삼당고래 다 소소라 삼다디 소소 마신 바다 된디게 로봇지게는 수레선 기능 거죠 어디기 기능 거죠 된가서 로봇지고라 된데 제고라서 다 나서디 나서 최된가 라마 개회 신인디게 송고 지고라 지상아서 냠는 디네 제고라 산지 디네 송요래 지사 당보 디고라 니바디고 숨도신 냠는 제고라서 된겐디 다 기능 거죠 로봇지고라 된디게 기능 산지게 송제 람든 된셔바디 기능 거죠 로봇지 된 소소게 냠는 제제 소소 곰잡 되는 소소 규라 최권조의 계여도 되는 막 아주 코발을 줘야게 아는 가서를 탈거래 가서 계월 파 지바지 되는 코발을 줘 되는 아주 고된 탈바세 고된 토병도 아주 코발을 최권조의 아주를 계여도 너 코발을 타야 고주고래 탈거래지 세상에 겹탄 되는 수교고래지.
Now let's then present how one goes for refuge. Because it's crucial that this is understood very clearly. So So when one goes for refuge or protection, what is one going for protection from? That is the sufferings of samsara, which can be expressed as protection from falling into the lower realms, or protection from the sufferings of samsara in its entirety. So these would be illustrations of why one goes for refuge to the three jewels, wanting their protection. So how do the three jewels protect us from suffering? Because as I said in the immediately preceding section, it's not that they can envelop us with their love, care and protection, and thereby we will never suffer again. So rather, whilst we may turn to them with a heartfelt wish, protect me from suffering, the way it's done is, now we go through each of the three objects of refuge, the three jewels. The Buddha jewel is the being in the form of Buddha Shakyamuni who taught the entirety of the method by which freedom from suffering or protection from suffering is attained. And he is the perfected exemplifier of the result of cultivating this method. So the Buddha jewel is the founder teacher, the teacher of the method by which protection is attained. That's the first jewel. Then the third jewel, the Sangha jewel. These are our companions on the path who have cultivated a high level of path within themselves. They are Arya beings, attained a high level of realization. And they are our companions on the path. So, for example, our spiritual teacher, the person who is laying out the sequence of trainings that we ourselves need to engage in. The person who is presenting the teachings initially from the Buddha to us and guiding us in how to cultivate those within ourselves. So that's the Sangha jewel, our companions on the path. Then the Dharma jewel refers to what will actually provide protection from suffering and what we, through following the advice of our spiritual teacher from the Sangha jewel, will cultivate in our own continuum, the true cessations and true paths. And it's those that actually provide protection from suffering. So in other words, through relying on the initial teachings taught by the Buddha jewel, presented to us by the Sangha jewel, and us ourselves cultivating them in our own continuum, where we generate the true paths and cessations within ourselves, the Dharma jewel. It is in this way that we, in effect, protect ourselves from suffering through cultivating, through relying on the three jewels.
Jamdo di Bekawa Chego Sene, Sanji Conjo Sedi, member Kabajida Bechagor, member Kabadina, member Kaba di Sanji Conjo Najanche. Then maybe Degi, Mendi, and a Chu Conjo Najanche. Then Delia, Robochi and the Anzu Menshabadi, getting go Jordan, the Bechagor. Chesa Membigi Anzu never tired. Member Horongi, Menga Madaje, Namsa, Samlos Daji, never Susha, La Bigi Pai Tengia, never Mevazeka, Marva, Membigi. Cesada Membigi, Ne Ganichilia, Men Ganisti Udu, and Big Samuda, how gore, Cesa didn't the big Menji gore. Cesada Mendi Daddy, that many measure by the men say, Dusule Dinas or Dizice, Manu Dinas out, Dinas hours, Menji Big, and Duce, Dadoche, Duce Palatine. And the Sosugi main desire do, and the Sosugi need the Tayungurwa. Tis a mention bada, and the main Yobache, and the member Yobache, Sosugi main the Masana, and the Nazatatu Yomarwa. Dinashi, Chisada, main the Chokonja, Chokonjanashi, main the Anzo Supunal Roche, so Sayodu, digging Nubitigi, Anzulia, and the Chinede the Tayungurwa. Or Dinashi, member Cabanashi, Sanyo Conjo digi. Maybe keeping men Jebanaji, Sanjo Conjo, Chu Conjo to be Tablam de Patu. Dine men shabadiki men duso de dine den sa roba chebanashi geningo jogi and nyamlan dambo dine chewore niba dine chudus chewore said malam de nga roba che. Tanga neba digi men sawa nashin anazuki dus gomche nyamlan cheyadu and anazuki gombigi anazu lodi nibadi ya shuk cher jodu and chogo josadi anazuki like yehodu and dus chene and kaso kovale yugore sadi gyoptante dineshi. The belly child till membata, menda, and it menshava sum the picture and the
To help make the meaning of the three jewels very clear, there's a famous example given by the Buddha himself, where the Buddha jewel is likened to a skilled doctor, the Dharma jewel to medical treatment, and the Sangha jewel to the medical professionals such as nursing staff, who will assist the patient. So we are the patient who has recognized that we are ill. So we go to a skilled doctor, in the analogy, that's the Dharma jewel, and we go to the skilled doctor. The skilled doctor, despite... Buddha jewel, that's a Dharma jewel, sorry, Buddha jewel, thank you. So the skilled doctor, despite their perfected skill, cannot with their hands remove our suffering. But what the skilled doctor can do is prescribe a program of medical treatment. And this program of medical treatment is likened to the Dharma jewel. But in order for us then to take this complex prescription and follow it well, we need skilled and experienced medical staff who will be able to act as our companions in our time of healing. So the skilled medical staff are likened to the Sangha jewel, spiritual teacher and so forth, our companions on the path. And they will guide us in our following of the medical treatment. And then what is it that leads us to healing, to gaining freedom from suffering? It is, on one hand, we've been given the correct prescription, this program of medical treatment. Accompanying that, we've been guided throughout, our hand has been held throughout, our following, to ensure that we follow this program of medical treatment well. But it's the medical treatment itself that healed us, but not its mere existence, but us following it well, us applying it well. That is what leads to healing. All three of those coming together, but in particular, but not solely, all three together, but in particular, it's our following of, our taking of the medicine, our following of the medical treatment that leads to healing.
Nanda dang zu ki ji kyamro nyamne che ore sa kyamro de simje tamju sanjo ko ba thobar che gi si bi janju simje janju sim gomne da simje tamju ko be dunga le dre kyo ba de nuba su yo sin kyamne konjo sum le kyamne konjo kyo gore sembe ge da du sine yi che je ne komya de kyamro ko ma asi ore wa da ding zo simje tamju sanjo ko ba thobar che janju simje sa ro wa de ji 다 심게 차여 제려야 다 코 심제 탐조 코요 누가 다들 껴봐도 껴비 누가 수요를 진짜는 건조스는 요래 세상 잡는 건조스는 껴버리 샘비게 이시셔야 돼 이시 고미해야 되다 짬조셔 봐 하시고 다 이시셔야 돼 짬조셔 봐서 디레다 디섬 당고래 제래.
The sequence of trainings that I've presented thus far, where one develops the foundation through thinking on impermanence and so forth, and then generates love, compassion, altruistic attitude, and bodhicitta. When one is developing the determination, I will become a Buddha for the sake of all beings, one is recognizing the incredible power, capacity that the Buddhas have to benefit beings. One is here saying, I too will become a Buddha. I will be counted amongst Buddhas so that I can also be of great benefit to others. So here, one is also going for refuge to the Buddha jewel. Refuge to the incredible capacity of the Buddha.
다 되네. 안에 가르쳐 오래서네. 다 냠len지에게 가르쳐 오래서네. 되네. 디스틴 마순 거래. To be kim Jamrije the give you sumro, sang you sumro, the sumri gives to what I said, right? Give you sum your was on your control. Just I do not have a cube in you, but consume Gyogudes and the Sumgali is easy.
So just to re-express that, because I made the error of saying just towards the Buddha jewel, it's towards all three jewels. So one is generating or generated bodhicitta, and then one goes for refuge to all three jewels, recognizing the capacity that they have to guide us to attain enlightenment for the sake of others. So in this way, we could generate refuge following the generation of bodhicitta, refuge in all three jewels, following the generation of bodhicitta.
That in my Yamlinche, that remembered Jictua, to be Kimbi Tenla Ngaba Yi, Tentim Ngala Lobdang, Lodang, Sambar Lop, and do some numerous sojourn Yanlake, Labra Lani, Sunwa Shindu J.S.
Coming to the seventh verse, the Buddha prays as the foundation for the non-ordained to train your mind to be in accord with the 5 lifelong vows and take the 8-day-long Mahayana precepts periodically, receiving them with sincerity, guard them dearly.
Kimbi Tenla Ngapa, and Tentim Ngala Lopdan, Chamber Lop said, Lodan Chamber Lop said. Chesan Tubasan Yujumnin de Yi, Chujum Suyagin, Yamlin Chedi, Kimba Namla, and Kimbi Tenla Ngapa, said Kimba, Rabjumai be Kimba de Yi, Chujum Suy, Yamlin Chi, Rimba de Karelamna, Tentim Ngala, Lodan Chamber Lop said, Sosugu, Lodan Chamber, and Gasore. Timga Sungure, Timga Soya, the Logure, Timga Sungure, this Surim Soya, that's Surim Soya, Yamija Sungore.
When the Buddha taught ethical restraint or ethical conduct, he included the following. So reading again the first 2 lines. The Buddha praised as the foundation for the non-ordained to train your mind to be in accord with the 5 lifelong vows.
Jesa Kimbi Tenla Ngaba said to Sine Yabuores at Soyadirwa, Jesa Garasungores, Tentim Ngala Logore said. That Timga said, Churum Soyadi, that did a Garzore, Manzuki, Soche Bata, Sochi Mes and Sochi Soya, and Edgy Machinle Soya, and Edgy Loyem Soya, Missoyma, Loyem Soya, the Negara Soja, Majin Missoyba, the Ne and Michel Amitu, Shigmes and Big Soya, and Digalia, Changdung Me said Soya, the Ding of Soyadi, down Surim Soyadi, Kimpigi Disungo, Esire.
The way we understand the word praise, that the Buddha praised this as the foundation, the taking of these vows, is the meaning behind the praise is so as to encourage those who have faith or trust in the Buddha. Take this as an encouragement that this is the foundation of training in ethics. So what are the 5 lifelong vows? So there are no killing, no stealing, no lying, no sexual misconduct, and no taking of intoxicants.
That Kimba Namla Disungores, that Loda Samba, Loda Samba, that Kuran Kimbanam, Loda Samba Soya Dirubada, Bene Garsore, this Soyadi, Song 2 Yagi, 2 Yagi Chagore, Kimbanam, this song by that song, Kimbi Tienche, this night Sombana, Song 2 Yoba, 2 Yagi, 2 Yoba, the Loda Samba is over.
I don't know how to translate. Let's just explaining the Tibetan. We have it in English. So to train your mind to be in accord with the 5 lifelong vows, which serve to protect your mind, or protect you, protect your mind. So the purpose of the vows is to provide protection.
Is that Kimbala Garisene, Misan Jugyo Mares, Gabaina, Samba Chegyo Marwa. Misan Juba Gashana, the Tata Marwa, the Sambas and the Tata Silva. Misan Juba Gashabane didn't Misan Jumena Puya Marwa, and Mia Mantua Marwa, Puja Merwa. Says that Kimbala 그 김벌이와 진짜 랍줄라 미사오죠 차상가고로 진짜 김벌로 로임디가 로임지교 말이에요. 진짜디 지교 말스까 아마도 미사오죠 가고 말 진짜 미사오죠 차상가바는 김벌 따다 제거 말이에요. 진짜 로임디 가바는 김벌에 따다지 참발이에요. 따다래서 그러다. 대송 투야교요 말이에요.
So these 5 lifelong vows, so to understand this meaning of to be in accord with the lifelong vows, it includes the understanding that this is something that is attainable for the non-ordained, because the ordained have the vow of celibacy. This would, the maintaining of celibacy would make the producing of children impossible for the non-ordained. So therefore, the 5 lifelong vows are attainable for the non-ordained. No killing, no stealing, no sexual misconduct. So it's not the celibacy vow, not lying, and not taking intoxicants.
디 domba 용고래 domba shu바인데 디 숭긴 세비게 domba shu바인데 긴yin domba 사 책으로와 제가 다den가디 domba 슈이시 domba 슈싱이 디 숭긴 세비 domba 슈나 아니 김비 domba 김비 땐래야 dombe 냠네 제 요르스 가리오스네 긴yin domba 제len제 냠네 제 요르에서 그래 제가다 domba 숭양 디 가르스네 다den가디 차고래 숭야 제고래 domba 마슈바이네 긴yin domba 마슈바이네 디 숭가디 숭고 고래 제래.
This term, lifelong vows, is a less common term. Usually they're called lay vows or refuge vows. So these are, but they remain the exact same set of vows, those same 5.
제사당은 좀 주름세디 아주기 디부사디 지게 디바 송야에게 디 주름세디 다디 계시모 슈자워 제사 주름송야디 류가 이스미 예제된 비 주름세디 니디 송야디 가서는 다데 준시에디 나이고니 준시고로와 나이고니 준시야다 아니지 나이고니 가래 준시야레 파소네 지금마 지 추수시야 파 주신제라 데서바 나이고니 미가와 실리고로와 근데 류유고네 소죄바들라 소바다 아니지게 구마고야다 로엔 제바 용고로와 니셔사디 류유고네 리고로와 이 유고네 샬라 네베 삼바다 아니지 데네 용고바사 데네자다 류가 이스미 예죄도 송고고래 제가 예죄 돈베가 돈바네 예죄 지기메에서 류가 이스미바데 샬라 네베 지기메에서 삼로 송와이나 디 수림레시래 수림레스 디 송고고래 제 디수르네 수림디가래 사이 탈바다 탐지 캠비고 고방 토비기 귀한 수림디기 차고래 이 수림디기다 아 저기 잔주심 유군에 라지 수림 송와이나 수림데 산이 고방 토비교 연단 탐지 중요하게 시설 마소는 수림레스 그러다 수림디 송고래스 제자다 개와치 말하다 미고방 토에 유대한 수림레 수림 송고래 수림 송바는 개다 개와 제 말하다 미고방 토고래 토고래스 어두 시자 수림세데 연단 탐지기 중요하게 시설 마소는 가서 사진 나신지레스 수림 야고여나 아니 연대 야고용 토고래스 개조 야고용 토고래스 대송고야 돼 대자다 수림 송고래스 돼 디송고래.
Ethical restraint is an indispensable training for spiritual development. It is the foundation from which all good qualities grow. The analogy that's used is that the soil, the fertile soil of ethical restraint is the foundation required for all good qualities to grow. So ethical restraint is the primary cause for rebirth in the higher realms. And it is indispensable for those striving for either liberation or enlightenment. It is the indispensable foundation for all spiritual development. We can understand ethical restraint as being the commitment not to harm through physical behavior, verbal communication, and even mentally, our way of thinking. So if we think of these 5 lifelong vows, there's 3 which are physical, killing, stealing, and sexual misconduct, where the ethics of restraining our physical behavior from acting in a way that physically brings harm, as well as the one verbal, that of lying, So here we're committing not to verbally harm others through lying, and then mentally we try and restrain even the mind that wants to harm others in such a way. So this is the training in ethics.
이사당은 저기 창동교 말했어야지 창동나 지당 창동나 디버 여르베스네 창호롱기 동바 잠기 디바데 자교 말해 창 이내다 가르 여르스네 창디 동바이나 먼저 셰바디 안에 지게 바 라시 미네 봐서 셰바 야고메 수 직진에 창게 라신 용도 아니 디가르선 내가 노트 먹으시기 돼서 지산 창게 라신 용도 아니 디 셰바 따다미네 봐지 디 견진에 현리아 치수셰다 준셰다 고하다데 용시바레스 지산 창게 라신도 디기 현 소줘바다 데네 용시기 돼서 데네 저 로임 제바다 데네게다 노트 데네 먹고 용시기 돼서 지네 노트 디바 먹고 사기 돼서 창게 견진에 안지네 아니 이거 창 동제 라신요도 소수게 개위 셰바디 라시민네 바차요도 네 개위 냠는 제알에 용거 말레스 곰기야다 삼노다야다 지잠니죠 고미제 셈 고미야디 용투 말디네 용 말레스 니네 자다 꽤 망보 용을 봐서 디 차데 동교 말레스 지가 고래.
So I mentioned there the relationship between 4 of the 5 lifelong vows and ethical restraint. And this is just to say something further on intoxicants. So here the word that is used is that of beer, but we should understand it to include all forms of alcohol and drugs. It's because the harm that they do is not from, or to express it differently, it's not that taking an intoxicant such as alcohol, taking a small amount of it, is in itself naturally non-virtuous. It is not. It's that the intoxicants alter one's mental state, and from an altered mental state, one is much more likely to engage in harmful behavior that one otherwise would not have, such as killing, stealing, lying, sexual misconduct. So therefore, intoxicants are to be refrained from. And again, not because the intoxicant itself is harmful, but it's due to altering one's mind. Harmful behavior is much more likely to follow, and therefore would be a severe impediment to to spiritual development. So it's for this reason that intoxicants are to be refrained from.
난 난달라 당아주 수름 송고리에서 다지 제자당이 릉아 예수님 요건에 샹리아 뇌비 자와서야다 자오기는 지금에 선배sam다 땅이 주인시야데 균내시임에 선배sam다야 되네 아니 지금 구마서야데 자오기는 구금에 선배sam다야 되네 아니 지금 로엠서야데 자오기는 지금에 선배sam다야 아니 되네 아니 지금 가사직 창균의 동매 선배sam다야 직시에 되네 맨에 소주에 semje 제 소주금에 선배 삼다야디 지자 되네게 제디다 수름소디 지금에 선배 삼다야디 디수름에 다가 수름사데 수름송세야디 먼저 삼로 나려야 디수 지금에 삼제 삼로디 담자디 삼로디 지금에 선배 삼로디 야네 야도 삼야다 안데네게 삼로디 가제나 슈체 쇠투야디 게치모 차와디 디 삼바데 코랑 지금에 선배 삼로디다 수름레다 The
principal meaning of ethical restraint is a commitment not to harm. And the way it's expressed here with the lifelong vows is not to harm through killing, stealing, lying, sexual misconduct, or taking intoxicants. So this needs to be very clear. Ethical restraint does not mean not physically killing. It means restraining one's mind from wanting to kill. So it is a mental process that results in not killing. So the meditation here is to reflect again and again on the harm that follows from such physical or verbal behavior, developing the mental commitment not to harm through killing and so forth. So this mind of ethical restraint is a virtuous mind. And this is what, when it's said that one needs to protect one's ethics, It refers to protecting this mind of ethical restraint from degenerating. So the practice is to meditate on this again and again, regenerating and strengthening the determination not to bring harm to others.
That the nigger surum song ID, that's surum song do gabla di chigime, some of the Tangazuki, the Tambata, Shishin to Tian, Nangidi, the nigger, not to Chungi Minus, because some no Shishin is some then Tambig no to Sungwene, the part and Betanjo, Dichin, Tigmaria, some died, Tambata and Shishin Tianji, Tingazu Sundu Gabla, Tambata and Shishin Tingu Gorva, Tambata Shishin Mena, Cochero, the Jedu Gorva, Tisadinza, Tambata Shishin Tingu or Sundu. Tisadi, Surum Sundu, Sundu Gabla, Tamba Shishin Tingu Bazada, Tamba Shishin did the Nigga Chando Chidu, something is near to be a thing in Tubulaya. Pingu or this Tamba Shishin, that another she near to say the Tamba the Shishin or danger, Yamlanchi Gorwa. Tisadine, that another Surum Sundu Gabla, Tamba the Shishin danger do Yamlanchi, and she near to be a thing in Tubulaya, and more by the Shine thing in Tubaina, Tamba Shishin daddy called Lela to go.
For when we generate virtuous minds, we utilize and generate and keep them, have them abide, keep them present. We utilize companion consciousnesses of mindfulness and vigilant introspection. These are the companions that ensure that our mind is ethical, and if our ethical restraint fades away, that we notice this and recall it. So this is the process that the consciousnesses of mindfulness and vigilant introspection play. They ensure, we utilize these companions to ensure that our mind is ethical, and when it's not, that we notice this and recall our mind of ethics. And these two companion consciousnesses of mindfulness and introspection, these are indispensable for the cultivation of virtuous minds, in particular that of single-pointed concentration, of calm abiding. So in our training of virtuous consciousnesses such as ethics, we are also familiarizing ourselves or becoming more habituated to utilizing, to relying on mindfulness and introspection. Thereby, later, when we strive to develop calm abiding, single-pointed concentration, we will be able to do so much more easily. Firstly, because we are greatly habituated to being ethical and restraining our mind from going into harmful behavior. And secondly, because the companion or assisting consciousnesses of mindfulness and introspection, they will be well developed. We'll be greatly habituated to being aware of our mental process and keeping our mind where we want it to be on ethics. And later, we'll be able to do this when we're developing single-pointed concentration.
na tu sam dai de re ji sang sim ja tham ji ge don da le ya sang ji ko ba thop gu du di so thop gu gu za da ngi lu nga yi sum ju ko ne xian ya an ji ge ju da so jue ba da ma jin ba lian ba da an ji ge lo yi la so ba da chang dong ya la so ba za o ge ni ji mia san bi ge sam lo na la du xin sam lo de ya ne ya du dang ya de da du dang jue ba de da di chu zhi nian de jie ba le si wo ji sang di du sam lo di 지자 심지어 탐지게 된다 삼당외자 상교고 본토의 규에 최고래 지자 당한서 디몽반의 개와치마 하다 미고 본토의 규 최고 지자다 상기기 손예 등한주기 상기 개와 하다 미고 본토의 규리 가르선 수름 송고래 지자 수름 송고래 제 수름 디 송고래 지자 디네자 디네게 삼당외나 개와치마 하다 미고 본토의 규 사고래 아니 제주심 유군의 라와자 상기고 본토의 규에 최고래 지래
In the context of the meditation, having generated bodhicitta, one now meditates on ethical restraint, where one meditates on these, or develops in meditation the determination not to kill, to steal, and so forth. And strengthening this determination through seeing the faults of doing so, the benefits of not doing so, and so forth. In this way, one creates causes for enlightenment, as well as causes for a good rebirth.
Adere. Adine delma du Duisam Nimar Sojan Yanlaki, Labra Lana Sonwa, Shinduchi, Sedida, Tsurim Soya Dada, then a Kap Kablia, and do something, do Kap Kablia, and Nimichiglia, Sojan Yanlaki, yes, a Sojan to Tabachi teaching Sojangi, and Yala, a yes, some week teaching Sojan to Batifa Shuja, and Dusine, Shune, and Yamlin Chevana, Labra Lana Shune, and Sonwadi. Songo Goedi Gechimboria Son, I seem to see it in the nature or essay. Niga, Labra Soni.
The verse concludes, and take the 8-day-long Mahayana precepts periodically, receiving them with sincerity, guard them dearly. Here one is first encouraged to take the 5 lifelong vows. So these one would always be living in accordance with, but only periodically from time to time take the 8 one-day vows, the Mahayana precepts.
Andi Adosine Sungures, the Nega Soya de Gechembores, the Radin, Casatebachimbe Sojongi, Sojan Dombalendu, Janshu Simbukunia Lanche, that was Chenanzo. Nine Yanlaki to Son Nimichikla, then Soyaki, Dustin, Soya de Chiguro, Chesaneza, Capcaplis, the Nimetapa, the Mevena, Capcapla, Cezan Benet, Manzunamune, Jed, Sevakeda, Sevajon, Sopa, the Dinechiguro, Chesanek, that Gabriel Sosugi, you see the Timbi Tone, and Dustin, the Gabriel Cabla, Dustin, Son they are where Son would SS, Sumudua.
Committed practitioners tend not to live within the 8 Mahayana precepts. In other words, they don't take them every single day. But nevertheless, they will take them regularly. So it's quite common that on the 8th and the 15th of the Tibetan calendar, the Mahayana precepts will be taken, as well as on other particularly auspicious days.
On the Denima, Chudum Sungore, Somadra, to sick New Bade, Meva, Digalia, Shanda Chasa, Son, Tishula, Karingures, and the Angele, Chudum Sung. That Chudum Soyadi, Nangazuki, Yawachima, some Tavena, Chudum Soyadi, and Yawachima had a milk about to be you. Janjus Mikunia Lawaza, San Yoko about to be Niga Chagore, just Chudum Soyadi, some died. That is Dene Jimmy Yamlen Jimmy Yamlen said, that's Sosugu Lunga Yusum Yukones, Sosugu Longe Dainada, Sosugu Luyukone, Sosugu Samli Tonina, Shenlia, Pampage Dugin, Sempik, Sosugi, that you benjo Tone in a Shenlia Tanji, Shengi Shenlepa Jane, and Juke, Shengi Dumasa, Digital Shenla Jigin, Sempik, Sosugi Shen, Sosugi Luyukone, Shenlia, and Judushin, Pampa Dugin, Sempik, some time. The Jimby Yamnes, don't you semba, that's all on the don't you semba giant, Jesa, Sosugi, that Sosu Samlona like Harcours, and Dangi, Menjige, Sosugi, Longu Tone, in a Shan Liapa, Jigging, Sembe Samlota, Sosugi, she and Ganshin, but in a Shan Liapa, Labin, Sembe Samlota, Sosugi, Lugicone, Shangi, Jiggy Shanlia, and Jiggy, Dunha said, and Digi to Yalia, Pember Dugin, Sembe Samdavena, Dine and Dusina some died. Jimmy Yamlin Chevare says, don't you semba child. Come Jimmy Yamlin Jesudu, so Sugi, don't you semba child, the Bendigo Chasan, Tangi, some dinning as so Gawasa Shavadin, Gawati, Shen Semja Tamje, Digi to the Dunga, Sel Papa Tangi, some Tavena, Diadidang, so don't you semba, just I did Jimmy Yamlin Sigore.
In the meditation, having generated bodhicitta, one meditates on ethical restraint, and thereafter, so what I've presented at the presentation on ethics, very, very briefly. There's so much more to say on this, but just to reiterate that ethics is the indispensable course of spiritual development. It is required for a good rebirth, as well as for liberation or enlightenment. And independence on your motivation, it will become, the mind of ethics will be a cause either for good rebirth or liberation and enlightenment. And if you have the motivation as has been established in this meditation of generating bodhicitta, your meditation on ethics becomes a cause for enlightenment, as well as implicitly a cause for good rebirth. Then the next meditation is that of generosity. So generosity, like ethics, is a mental practice. Generosity is the wish to give to others. And this, in the meditation, one imagines giving to others materially so as to ease their suffering, sharing our possessions and our material abundance with others to ease their suffering. Also, using our knowledge and sharing that verbally with others to help them in their suffering situations, and also to help others physically to ease their suffering. So here, this is again, the practice of generosity is a mental training. And therefore, one practices here easing the suffering of others by giving of ourselves in any and every way that we can.
Bendigo samdaje da jimba tongi sembe samla chaide jimbigi jimba nyamlen cheba. Sanda sosogi da tongye imene zero da 지당은 진비교 수연남지 최종 세야디 조 공로를 하려 거래. 배네 직배 dob침부 휴지야 지 현대적 로봇 체베네 공로야 소속이 담년다 영하다 소속이 안지 된다지 주역이 체도 안지 체베네 안에 손음 충충마다 사고 말해. 내 대신 가서 제바나 샘전 탐지게 동화세야 디기 주역이 체도 이 선배 삼다제 아니 안 주게 배는 저기 소소나리아 안지게 수 다보게시비 샘진 키로다 자와로다 힘으로 가려면 콘소 데네게 칼라테 직제리 갑리네 당원에 콘솔이야 샘진 탐정에 디테 콘솔레데 대화 되바래 동아미디어 그 대화 중간 디기 중나 삼제 다 샘진 탐제기도 한다 샘진 탐제 산조고바 토고도 지제 토반사 니샬리아 당위 진비 냠리지 인상 예심제담 사교고와 토비치도 이코들야 제기 샘비게 삼반 남다 홀레 잠제 삼다지 두 스텝에는 안 디니기 인하서기 칼라제바디 쇠남데 쇠남 개침보 사고래지 제사 사교고바 토비 귀야디 체고래지 사교 귀체고래지.
A natural consequence of cultivating the generous attitude is that one will actually practice generosity with one's body, one's speech, and one's body and speech. So through developing this mind, one will, in the outside world, express this generous attitude. So the additional point to make here is that the amount of virtue that one accumulates from an act of generosity is primarily dependent on the motivation. So there are many different aspects will have an impact on the amount of virtue that's accumulated, but primarily it is the motivation. So for example, if, let's just say one's giving some food or giving some money, and it's a set amount of food or money. So therefore the substance, what is being given, doesn't vary, but if we take differing attitudes. So you give something to someone else with the attitude of, oh, you're hassling me, just take this and go away, you're in my face. So here, you could say, oh, it's a practice of generosity. You're giving to ease the suffering of others. They're hungry or they need of some money. But the mental attitude is hardly a virtuous attitude. Whereas to swing to the other end, if one has generated a sincere wish to help others, particular, recognizing that this is a suffering mother being before one, that they are in need of a meal, they are in need of some financial assistance. Whatever the reasons are why they are in this position isn't important. They are in need, and I have the capacity to help. And I will help them now in this small way that only temporarily eases their suffering. But through this connection we make, in the future, I will guide them to abandon the causes of suffering and accumulate the causes of happiness, and I'll guide them all the way to enlightenment. So here we see how vastly different the motivations are. What has been given? Identical. The merit is greatly different. The virtue that's accumulated is greatly different. Why? Because virtue is a mental activity dependent on the motivation. So the motivation is what is different. So whilst the substance, or in the person one offers to or assists, this does impact on the virtue accumulated, principally it is the motivation.
dine zada nga jugi chiki jimbigi jimba taina da digi jimbigi dewo di maomba na nga jugi chiki kawa kiawa chima lada mi ko ma kewene den dele ya ane ga se tunjin ya wo yong re je tunjin ya wo yong re je le jisa da nga jugi sosugi kiawa chima samtawene setele ya sosugi jimbi nyamne chebene kiawa chima la tunjin ya wo ya benjor da dine sa do ya kanga ma cha yong re je 안디 마제 태과침비기 냠네 산지 고마 투비지는 소소리야 튕게 야고여나 샹리야 펜바 개침을 주투고래 제가 소소 튕게 매나 아니 샹리야 펜바 주투고 말와 동하세야 돼 샹지 강하세야 로버지 투 말와 제가 샹기 동하세야 돼 샹리야 니까제 산싱기 토네 파 로버지제 아니 추고야라 추제야다 칼라고야라 칼라제야 둘로고야 둘로제야 니니기 토네 교디기로 로버지야라 소소 변조 고고로와 제가 변조면은 로버지 투요 말에 현유동아 세투 말 제가다 소소 변조 고원자 소소 변조 양의 규디 소소기 진바다지 진변냠네 진바 소소강 두도 진바다지 디제베는 소소 변조하고 차기래 되네 디토네 샬 로버지 투그래서 나 소소기 소소랑을 매베이네 소소기 진변냠네 야고 제되바 있나 안디기 슈긴기 샬 로버지래 슈치부 판도 연구했어요 판도 전부 제두고 어래세 소소를 변조를 매나양 이 셴리에 변조를 로그램 슈고 로고 야고 제두고 어래세
The ripening result of ethical restraint is a good rebirth and thereby being able to spiritually develop towards enlightenment. The ripening result of generating a generous outlook is that in our future rebirths we'll have an abundance of favorable circumstances and like material wealth and so forth, and having done practiced generosity with a far more expansive mind, with a wish to attain enlightenment, when we attain our good rebirth and have abundant material circumstances, we will have the strong habituation or inclination to being generous. And thereby, we will have, through our abundance of material goods, the means to bring and to ease this material suffering of others. So right now, if one does not have much in abundance, much materially to share with others, but by generating this sincere wish to give to others, one is only giving mentally, but one is developing this outlook and creating the causes that in the future one will have an abundance. And then with that abundance being accompanied by this generous attitude, one will use that abundance to ease the suffering of others and thereby aid our spiritual development, strengthen our connection with beings, and so forth.
다 진바들 다된 안수셔대 상승이 진비고 시고래 다 진바들 취기 진바데 미직비 진바세 제단다 심진 부순도 추나 사제 디와 심진 소 교와이나 디 미직비 진바래 미직비 진바데 진바 빼하고래 네네 미직비 진바 차고래 아니 네네 소소랑랑게 대지셰바나지 소소랑랑게 은변행한테 잠니제 삼다야래 삼다야다 소소게 다데 미주름송야 되게 봐 송제 미 현달레네 소소나 데네게 데네체네 야고여서 발랍제 람덴체체 콘솔레도 스냠네 제주바이나 데서 취기 진바차기래지 지사도 신에 진바 상생이 진바다 취기 진바다 네 미지비 진바세데 차산 진바를 두스요래서 그래.
And a further way to understand generosity, as I mentioned at the outset of talking on this training, is that whilst we naturally think of generosity in a material sense, and this certainly is included within the training of generosity, there are two other general divisions. The one is, so the first is giving materially, the second is giving the generosity of giving fearlessness. What this refers to is helping others when they are at a time of extreme desperation. In particular, it refers to helping others who are fearing for their life. So where us as average people get to help beings in such a state is when an insect or an animal is fearing for its life. Perhaps an insect is in a puddle or a pond, and it's not a fish, it's drowning. It's nothing. There's nothing that they can do. Their wings are wet, and the body is sinking. So this is compared to, we could relate to as an insignificant being, but for that being itself, it is petrified. Its life is ending. If you can reach in and save its life, this is the practice of giving, of fearlessness, saving the life of others. And this is an incredibly important practice to do. And then the third type of generosity is the generosity of giving Dharma. So this independence on one's Dharma knowledge is something that everyone can engage in. For example, with those that one has a close relationship with, a relationship where one's words carry some influence, where someone is receptive to what one says. One can speak to them in a skillful way, in a way that they will relate to, guiding them against, for example, a biased attitude, a partial attitude, an attitude that discriminates. Guide them away from that. One can also guide others to develop a mind of love or a mind of compassion, wanting others, whomever they are, to have happiness, to be freed of suffering. No matter who they are, all beings are worthy of being freed of suffering. Also, in terms of ethics, one can guide those that one has the appropriate relationship with, where they'd be receptive to one, and talk to them in a way that's appropriate to who they are, guiding them away from harmful behavior, harmful ways of thinking. So this is the giving of Dharma, the third category of generosity.
Ya control ya Lama tang sangye da control ya chubu puya di chubu puya la gorwa an shen le ya ma shen ya chi jeba di jimba tang wa si yu da ya chubu puya ji ji da dine yin za da ngang zu le me do ji ne de ya control so su ge ji ge control me do ji pyu bi ne semje tham ji ge dön da le ya sangye ngi sangye go ba to bi ji di chi do ngi jimbi ya control ya me do pyu yu sem bi pyu ba da an me ji ge then yuancharo puya vinada on do sin puya desu control choba chago de tinga de dongwe sim ya puya sim be da dongwe sim ba chago jimbe nyam li go de andi ma se an da denegi pa so diwa jik to de kablia medo ning ji wo ro chi da an denegi jik sing no da medo da zebo ning ji wo ji tong so ne desu chasan no be ning ji de ya wo desu chasan ya control cho puya sim be desu ngi ya control puya sim be sam da we ne de ani chopuye chagore denegi samdaje dan denegi pubi gewe zawadi ni gewa pugi sambe samde puwenza soso gewe zawasa ni gewe zawadi semjan tamje digi dubyana dunga seya semjan tamje digi dubya shu digi yongwa sho sambigi semjan tanje le pember yongwa sho sambigi samdawa ina di sosugi gewasa gewadi semjel 파제 말에 제가 디엔 진파차 취기 진파차고 저 누스는 안 저기 삼류톤에 직 누스진의 진파다 누스다에 제가 되네 인자다 안 저기 다 소소게 매바 제자 소소게 둔리아 안지 매도다 신도다 직 림보치 직단 빼 빠도 매바 직슈 저 예배 매바체 안제수 차상 야 권쇼를 푸기 선배게 직 누스진의 푸기에 선배지 푸기 매바체 바이나 아니 제수 진비냐면 차고 진바세 그래 지사 데네 푸기였으면 푸비게다 디기다 쇠놈 사시베 쇠놈디 디기 쇠놈 디게 셈제 탐제 디기데 템버샤다 셈제 던주 동아 제제 디기데 템버쇼 셈제레 템버쇼 셈베 데네게 응와 제베나 다 추기 진바 차고 그래 제데 디네자 주 진비냐면 제데 도스 제베나 가서 쇠놈다 난데 지게 예 사고래 제디냐면 제 도스요래 사죠 푸비기 쇠남 사이로와 쇠남제 셈제 탐제 롱와제는 주의지 마소래 매도 부여되다 주야 들와 상일 푸이로와 대 푸이베 대대 쇠남 사이 소소 쇠남 사이로와 니네 쇠남데다 셈제 탐제 롱와제 셔베나 대 셈제를 주기지 마차게 해지는
The presentation I've given thus far on the practice of generosity has been directed to one class of beings, which are ordinary suffering sentient beings. The other class that one practices generosity towards are your one's Lama and the three jewels. Here too, the motivation is primary. So when one makes makes offerings to the Lama and the three jewels, maybe one just is offering a flower or water bowls, do so with as virtuous an attitude as possible. Offering just a flower or one's water bowls, think to oneself, I'm offering to the teacher of the path of enlightenment, and I'm doing so on behalf of all sentient beings. May all beings be able to have this opportunity to offer to the Buddha or to one's Lama, to whomever one is making this offering. And may all beings be able to make this offering. And just like myself, who has the wish for enlightenment, may all beings make the offering with this desire to attain Buddhahood for the sake of others. And so this way, one can offer on one's shrine some flowers or water bowls. Likewise, with a similar attitude, one can visualize magnificent garden, or one sees it on television or is out in town, these natural environments of great beauty. Visualize offering these to the Buddhas, to one's Lama, and doing so on behalf of sentient beings with the wish. I'm offering this to the Buddhas, to my Lama, in order to create merit so that I can become a Buddha for the sake of others. May all beings generate such a motivation, and we all together offer these beautiful environments to our Lama, to the Buddhas, and in this way accumulate virtue to attain a state of lasting happiness. So here, this process is entirely mental, or one may be doing it physically on one's shrine, but one in this way accumulates virtue dedicated towards attainment of enlightenment for the sake of others. And then a further way that one practices this is having made such an offering. One knows that one has now accumulated, in dependence on this virtuous mind, vast stores of virtue. That virtue one can offer to the fulfillment of the heart desire of our Lama, of all the Buddhas, which is to suffering beings, that they may meet the Dharma, cultivate the Dharma in their own continuums, and thereby attain enlightenment. So in this way, one first offers material generosity of either physically making offerings or mentally making offerings, and in this way one accumulates vast stores of merit. So that would have been the practice of material generosity. Now one offers that merit to the fulfillment of the aims of one's Lama and the Buddhas, which is that all sentient beings hereby accumulate the causes to meet the Dharma, to cultivate the Dharma within themselves and attain enlightenment, freedom from suffering. And here, where we are now offering the virtue we have accumulated, this is included within the practice of giving of the Dharma. So in this way, either at one's shrine or in meditation, one engages first in offering a material generosity and thereafter the giving of Dharma.
Dine zada ngara jugi dosine da jimbi nyemle jisa dine zada ngara jugi chik lega chitowe ne da kunlo delia adingi ju bene chis kawa lega dosa chiorwa to Tsongkhapa na za sodai na shenle pemba chiyona sambi shenle pembe dangi dusi lega chi ligye sambi dangi di lega leba di shenle pemba ja ko yong sho sambi samda je ani ko ngan lega chi doji lega tebe ne dinigi ano kuno la kar so ngi pha lega ji kontrol pha lega ligi di lega da shenle pemba chiyona di ji ne lugi jawa di kontrol ya tigye sambi dusi ne samda we ne anzo ne je lega legi worde ne kunlo samle tangye thone ane gewasa ayu de bashi chagorwa dene.
Furthermore, whatever activities you engage in the day, work and elsewhere, otherwise, generate this motivation that has been set here, generate bodhicitta, as well as ethics and generosity and the determination that everything I do today, I will do so as to benefit others. And if one spends most of one's day at the place of work, perhaps whether it's a factory or in a shop or in some other form of business, working in an office, whatever it may be, despite this activity being quite mundane and ordinary, nothing particularly special, with such a motivation to utilize our body to bring benefit to others and certainly not to harm them, one creates vast stores of merit just from our ordinary endeavors.
근데 칼라타마로 지어네 안저기 some other color kyön셔 촐러르셔 바 데네 촐러르셔다 판 마도르셔스미 바 유샤베나 펜스카요 말다디 홀루바 지나 칼라 kyön셔 칼라 모와시네 유샤바 오다디바 부이세다 아니지게 셈제사로 콘솔리자 직 펜두걸 야고레스 콘솔리 펜버쇼 선배 삼다제 아니 콘솔리 펜 된다 인섬직 파 유샤베나 아니 군노 삼다나 토네 셈제 무슨 디길래 짐바 차로 거라 제자 개와서 거라 봐 짐비니 짐바 기소소 남사고래.
Similarly, after enjoying your meal, if there's some food left over, if one just discards the food, no real benefit. If one gives it to, say, your pet with no real thought, not much benefit in terms of merit, although your pet may be quite happy. But if one develops a motivation such as specified here, that by giving this food to my pet, or perhaps to some insects or some birds, may I ease their suffering in this instance, and not only in this instance, may I be able to ease this being's suffering in its entirety through this connection that I make, and I offer my merit so this happens. And in fact, not just this specific being that I connect to, but all beings, through this act of generosity, of giving away my abundance of food, my leftovers, my abundance of food, by giving it to this one being. Through this merit, may I ease the suffering of all beings, both the temporary suffering as well as all the subtle levels of suffering of samsara. May, through this action, I lead all beings to the state of enlightenment. So here we see again, it's a very simple act of giving some leftovers, but there's an incredible motivation. And as with all these trainings, it is the motivation, the mind, that determines whether something is meritorious or not, and how much virtue it accumulates or not.
개화 두고 그래 세팅 아주 다데 아주 동아시아 디기도다 삼나탄타 돈에 시기요 바자 제자 디네기 돈에 아주 꿀노 디네시케제 셈제 탐제기도나 산조고방 토벌 쇼스 베섬마다 셈제 탐제 잠바다 펜베 셈비 군네 라지도 셰바이나 나는 아주 차사 개화사고 제자 꿀노 돈도 도시네 삼나탄에 땅바인데 개화사고 그래제 땅도 도송 주거와.
So therefore, the meaning of Buddhist practice is to transform your mind. What makes any practice or any activity, whether physical or verbal, virtuous or not, depends on the motivating mind. And how virtuous it is or how non-virtuous it is depends on the motivating mind. Therefore, Buddhist practice is focused on transforming one's mind. And through our mental transformation, our expression of these minds will be physical and verbal. And in this way, we will directly bring benefit to others. But how much benefit we bring depends on the development of our mind. And in terms of a focus, a final objective or a primary objective we have, that of enlightenment, becoming a Buddha for the sake of others, so that we can lead others to a state freed of suffering, this is the supreme motivation behind every action. Okay. So thank you. Then we'll conclude therefore for this afternoon. Thank you very much.